Okay, so Creative Business Unit 3's relentless content assault is continuing. It's mired in a fake controversy, despite announcing a, well, completely unexpected feature that's awesome, and also the most sought-after quality of life upgrade of all time. Yeah, Friday's live letter was a wild ride, so let's get into it and what we can expect. First off, release timing. So the patch is called Buried Memory, and it's arriving in two parts, 6.2 and 6.25, with one part coming in late August, the other part at a later date. Interesting enough, the Japanese title translates to Forbidden Memory. Not buried, as in unwanted, but buried intentionally, prohibited. So I wonder if that's perhaps a hint at something. Anyway, for content, we finally have more glamour dresser slots. It's all the way up to 800. For a lot of people, that's basically the most important news, but I guess I should bother to talk about the rest. So obviously, more MSQ, a new dungeon, and a new trial on both normal and extreme. Now, also, the FF4 references will not stop. The new dungeon is called the Fell Court of Troya, with Troya being this sort of idyllic matriarchal paradise from FF4, but in 14 it looks a bit more like this, so fell indeed. Now, it's clearly the place where Golbez and the Elemental Thrones were hanging out, which of course gives us a bit of a clue as to what we'll be doing there. I think probably finding out what our villains are up to, and maybe even doing something about it. We're also going to learn more about our Voidsent friend, and we'll be spending some time with Sid, based on these screenshots. Which is great, because anytime Sid, Biggs, or Wedge appears, it's usually brilliant content, so just put them in everything. Not serious. Anyway, at any rate, expect more of the same here, more of the usual, so a few hours of great story, a few excellent fights, including, of course, the mysterious first trial of this expansion's trial series, which we know absolutely nothing about, so that'll be neat. Also, obviously, we're getting more Pandemonium. This time we're heading to Abyssos, which is the name for the bottomless pit of hell. Lovely. There's nothing super crazy here except for the one thing where they're dropping the wait for Savage unlock from 2 weeks to 1. They're basically doing this as a test run because they heard people ask for that. But they've also heard some people's concerns, like any possible knock-on impacts on the consumable and crafted gear markets. So we'll see how those go. We're also getting the next Unreal trial then, Sephiroth, which has actually seen some mechanical changes to basically just keep it nice and challenging, despite being a 6-year-old fight. So that's pretty neat. And with that done, we can talk about the kind of joke controversy. It's not really one. So, Relic Weapons were scheduled to show up, and they are, but there is a bit of an asterisk that had a few people kind of pissed off. So, they're going to show up in 6.2.5, but as part of the continuing Hildebrand quest series because they are Manderville weapons. Now, apparently the idea of having to do around 4 hours of quests is just too much for a weapon for some people, which is a bit crazy considering the past grinds. That led to a bunch of conversation about how the comedy is subjective and how the escape button is in fact free. But honestly, I think it's one of those controversies where it's kind of hard to find anyone who's truly angry at the news. I think it's just people shitposting at each other. Yeah. So the Mandervilles interacting with Reyna should make for some fun content. Definitely reminds me, I need to get on this Hildebrand train friggin' ASAP. Though, people are assuming that the quest-centric progression means that this will harken back to the days of Realm Reborn or Heavensward relics, which, yeah, they were hyper-grind fests in existing content, instead of taking us to a new zone like Eureka or Baja. However, last year, Yoshi-P did say that they plan similar to those two, but with a different nuance and without necessarily doing raid content. That'll be something. At any rate, they are a while off yet, so people have got plenty of time to get up to speed. There's another tiny bit that some people weren't happy about, and that is job changes, but it's more for the future than a 6.2 thing. Basically, the team said that they're actually holding off some Dragoon and Astrologian changes that they had planned, and it's purely because the team is actually blindsided by the response to 6.1 Samurai changes. People want Kaiten. They did not like it going away. So players are a little bit terrified, but they did promise a post explaining their intentions. So I think they are aiming for wider community feedback or whatever, instead of just, well, what happened that led to Kaiten's untimely death. Now on that, they're also planning some changes to crit and direct hit. So as it stands, guaranteed crit and direct hit attacks get proportionately less value from stats and buffs. And this throws off the delicately balanced situation. So turning extra percentage chance directly into damage on those attacks would be a quick fix. And that basically is what they plan, but they're going to have some more information in the next live letter. And now, it's time for the surprise part of the live letter stream, one that serves as a reminder that this team really does care about the whole player base. So when first mentioned, Criterion dungeons were planned as a new style of dungeon that would scale with party size and basically would be more challenging. And this prompted a lot of people to rejoice because there's genuinely no hard 4-player content in the game. But that's not what they just announced. What actually is happening is 2 new genres of dungeon entirely. So first, we've got variant dungeons, which are these kind of casual, fun-oriented dungeons. They scale with party size, they have no composition rules while allowing for job changes, and multiple dungeon routes that lead into branching storylines, all narrated by the certain someone who is going to be joining us. So it certainly is interesting that what initially was pitched to these Criterion dungeons changed. So did they brazenly decide to ignore the dedicated hardcore people? No, they didn't, because they dropped a little bit of a bombshell, because that's actually not the Criterion dungeon. There is yet another type of dungeon. And, well, it's literally what they're called in Japanese too. Quote, another dungeon. So that's what the mode is called, another dungeon. In English, it's called Another Path Criterion Dungeon. Basically, it's another thing in the Sildan subterrane, or ASS for short, and it's a high difficulty version of the dungeon that has a different layout. It has a set number, like a set sort of thing for enemies, but it does use the same visuals. So there's no branching paths, no NPC, no job swapping. It's just a light party. But that's actually not all, because ASS is around the extreme level in terms of balance, but also with a twist. Raise actions don't work. Instead, every player gets access to a limited amount of raises, and after that, death means death until a full party KO. Now that basically means no cheesing, no brute forcing enemies with raises. You have to get a clean victory. And I think in FF14, that's what's making it be distinguished from like your usual Alliance raid, or like the other raids like Asphodelos in their kind of normal modes versus say like an Asphodelos Savage, right? Where you can do the reses and stuff in Savage, but you'll quickly fall behind in terms of damage and it won't work. Here, I think they're just trying to make that like same distinction for this sort of content. So it actually sounds pretty awesome. Sounds like it'll be a really good challenge. But the thing is, extreme's not enough, because there's also Ass Savage. Yeah. No matchmaking for this one. Only pre-made parties, and all enemies respawn after a party KO. Basically, that means the whole dungeon is an extremely long boss fight. Pretty wild. And enemies also get stronger with the passage of time too, so no sitting around waiting for CDs. Now, if you want an idea of how hard this is actually going to be, the team apparently was thinking of using Ultimate to describe this instead of Savage. So that's just the sort of thing you genuinely don't see for a dungeon in an MMO. That's interesting. I think it's great in a bunch of levels. I mean, a new type of dungeon that feels drastically different and can defy the MSQ dungeon convention, that opens up just so many new things. The variant version sounds pretty amazing. People have been, lamenting dungeons just becoming meat grinder corridors, so this is something that's genuinely different. It means they can maybe do some of those old school, like really big dungeon designs again. And if it's going to be full of lore, as they suggested, that will be really cool. Because of course we have this NPC who will be, well, they said, talking a lot, and there'll be quite a lot of routes, including hidden ones. So it just seems like that's neat. And then using the same assets they've created for the Another Path stuff, that's also great. I mean, even the decision to make Savage respawn enemies on death, that's great. That's pretty cool. It means it truly is asking for no mistakes. But of course, I do hope they know what they're doing with the time limit. I think it does make sense on paper because you don't want players to wait for cooldowns every pool. But if the difficulty is coming primarily from the timer, I mean, generally I do think it's you know, it's like with WoW Mythic Plus, I think using the timer to get your difficulty is just a little bit, well, you know, some people could say lazy, so we'll have to see how it actually pans out here. Anyway, I didn't actually know any of this, so here is some information on the setting of the dungeon. It's really interesting. So, Silda itself was basically like a sister state to Ul'dah, but it was destroyed after a fight, where Ul'dah basically unleashed a Magitech version of the T-Virus, causing Silda's dead to rise up and destroy their own city. And now, Ul'dah is actually where Silda originally was, but there's a lot of excavating to do. And I believe that bit at the end of ARR where you're running about underneath the ground, I believe that's actually happening in the place where the dungeon is set. Subterranean, of course, does mean we're going to be, exploring the aqueducts and the deep waterways beneath Ul'dah. I think this is genuinely exciting. It's fun to see the team actually innovate on things. And I like how there's still a lot of where we would call home left to explore. And, if I'm going to be real smooth, if you want another game that's full of lore, has branching narrative, multiple routes, a few different endings, stuff that's all based around the player's actions, you can always check out the game that we're developing called The Pale Beyond. You can actually wishlist it on Steam right now, which, if you're actually interested in the game, would help us out a lot. Hey, gotta play that self-promo game, you know? Alright, let's talk about the other incredible feature, and that is the Island Sanctuary. Now, the unfortunate news is this will be 6.2.5, and we're not going to have footage of it until the next live letter, but we did get a ton of great info that's just exciting. So, the island looks pretty huge, per their rather interesting looking measurement. Everyone gets their own island for free, and it's intended to act as a loop of casual solo gameplay entirely separate from the rest of the game. So, gather items, craft tools, gather better items, craft better tools, grow crops, cultivate seeds, collect rare and shiny critters, build your own base, and even make handicrafts that you can then sell to other players. And what's cool is none of this requires or uses gil. It has an island-specific currency and inventory, which, that's just great. And then that currency can be used to purchase special items. So essentially, it really is a full-on Animal Crossing minigame within FF14. And based on how they've been talking, it sounds really substantial. I think, wow, it's a game within a game. Finally, then, there is all the miscellaneous stuff. Alright, the old MSQ keeps on getting better because Judy support is now in the last few post-ARR dungeons and a few Heavensward ones, which caused quite a bit of reaction to, of course, chat seeing Yzael, with Steps of Faith being reworked to be a solo quest Judy. That'll be pretty sweet, because if the Cape Westwind and La Hebrea reworks are anything to go by, that is going to be a pretty damn incredible experience. They also had to remake the Good King Moogelmog, because basically he was too damn complicated to do the Judy support system, so they had to remake the entire thing, and they say it's going to be a good entry fight for 8-player trials. So, neat. Then Tataru's Grand Endeavor will be continuing, this time tying into the Shadow of Mac questline. That's the Heavensward Alliance raid stuff, so that poses some questions, and I suppose you may as well do that Alliance raid now, so that you're ready. Then, the Omicron are our next tribal quest, and it's a gathering one, so I guess we're restocking the Ultima Thule food court, or something like that. Then Adventurer plates are coming out of beta with an updated editor, and basically just more of everything. There's like a new system for portraits and gear sets. They're actually going to be used in Mahjong now, so that's also pretty neat. And a good reminder that I really need to polish up my Mahjong skills. Okay, next then, PvP. It's getting Series 2. Crystalline Conflict is moving into Season 3, and Rival Wings will be coming back. And I'm fascinated about that because there's now so much more appetite for PvP with the success of Crystalline Conflict. There you go. This was a crazy live letter. So much content is coming to this game, and it's not just the quantity, because even when they're pumping here, we're seeing that they're finding the time to make efficient, interesting decisions that mean that the content that they're producing will cater to all the players. Because what they're doing with what was Criterion Dungeons, it's great for casuals, and it's great for even up to the most hardcore players in the game. They've managed to cater everyone, and that's just a brilliant thing. It's just insane to think that we're getting an entire new type of dungeon and the Island Sanctuary in the same patch. Never mind everything else. So whatever Yoshi-P is feeding the dev team, we need to find out what it is, and we need to put it in the water supply. Okay, that's it. That is what's coming in 6.2 and 6.2.5. And of course, as expected, late August is when 6.2 will drop. And even just the idea that it's like, what, every 4 months? Even just the idea that we can, like, expect the content cycle of this game so regularly, you know, based on the game I've spent most of my time with, it's just insane. It's a beautiful thing. So, congratulations to the team. I cannot wait for this patch. And if you'd like to do anything, of course, you can check out the other videos on this channel, but also we are developing a game, The Pale Beyond. It is a narrative role-playing game, survival theme, that sort of, it's not literally set on Earth, so it's not actually the Antarctic, but yeah, Antarctic. Yeah, I mean, hey, if you ever like the TV show The Terror, which actually we almost were working on at a point, which is a funny story for another time, or like, you know, maybe you've heard of like the Shackleton expedition, the Scott expedition, all this stuff, and I think the game will be super, super up your alley. So that's what our development team is doing, so you can check that out on Steam. All right, now that I've done the self-promo, have a brilliant day. Hope you're excited for this patch, and I'll see you next time.